the strata and St. Mountain Helens and all this.
No video.
But here's the thing. Heat transfer by radiation, gravitational potential paradox of Michelson's Morley's experiment. I'm Dr. Carl W. Deems from Burning Bright Ministries. My website is burningbrightministries.com. We've had a conference now since Friday. We have a lot of information that we've already put forward. So we're kind of getting towards the end here. We're finishing up the history of modern science. Modern science now takes a big, if you will, change in course right around the turn of the century, because they made some discoveries that were not expected, let's say, or they didn't fit the evolutionary uniformitarianism paradigm. Yeah, let's say it that way. Stephan and Boltz, their experiments show that in general, radiant energy is both emitted from and absorbed by the surface of a body. Well, what does that mean? It implies that the universe cannot be infinitely large and infinitely old as it stands. That was a big hit. The uniformitarianism and Darwinism right there. What is that? It cannot be infinitely large, so it cannot be infinitely old as it stands, so it had to have a beginning. Yeah. Just like the Bible said. Now they did that, they found that out scientifically, right? Then you had Johann Friedrich Kohler was his name. Zoller. That name is missing here. Also, change that in your notes, by the way. That should be Zoller. And for some reason, I'm not seeing. I made some changes, but they're not there. I know I made these changes in the middle of the night. And they're not there. But look at your notes. It should be Zoller. I think it's Johann Friedrich Zoller. He calculated the gravitational potential within an infinite Newtonian universe. He demonstrated that at any point within an infinite homogeneous, like homogenized universe, would have an infinite gravitational potential, which means supergravity. Everybody would be squished. Well, you can't have that. But he proved it. I think it was Zoller. Z-O umlaut L-L-E-N-E-R, something like that. And then you had the Michelson-Morley experiment. According to Maxwell's experiments, equations, which we talked about earlier, light was thought to propagate with a fixed velocity through all-pervading ether. Well, because they're trying to explain if you have light, which has no mass, it has to go through. Everything has to go through something, right? Sound waves have to go through something. You have a fish swims in the water. Everything, So they found, light has a propagation of a wave. So if it's a wave, but we can't see it, it must be an ether there. But the experiment failed to prove the Earth was moving through an ether as they expected it would. So the property of light is strange. In other words, there's no ether. So now they got a third problem. Here's Einstein. Einstein comes up with the general theory of relativity equals mc squared. You ever heard of that, right? Yep. E is energy, mass, times the speed of light squared. As a result of his theory, the universe has only three possibilities. The universe is increasing indefinitely over time. The universe is increasingly yet ever more slowly. The universe is increasingly to a maximum value and then What does that mean? It has a beginning. Einstein's theory of general relativity means that the universe had a start and will have an ending. In other words, it is not eternal. Again, going against Kant and all them other bozos. Right? Einstein tried to fix his findings with a constant. This is really true. He wanted to make the universe static, like the uniformitarian guys believed it. He believed it. He was he bought into the religion, and so he put a constant in there to make the universe static. If physicists can't figure out something, they always put a constant to it. Just remember that, okay? Repulsive force constant. We call it repulsive force constant to allow for a static universe, but it was disregarded within a few years. All right, we're not going to do a quick review. Well, I guess we did. Here's the history of modern science. It starts with Renaissance and Reformation. You had Gutenberg invented the printing press, and you had an information avalanche. Galileo was persecuted by the Roman Catholic Church because he saw what the Catholic Church said couldn't be. He saw moons orbiting Jupiter, and he also was doing his own Bible study. Theistic science makes more and more discoveries, right? 1500, 1600, 1700, modern science grows. Then around the 1700s, you have rationalism and higher criticism of the scriptures takes root. You end up with uniformitarianism and Darwinism. In 1925, you have the Scopes trial, but almost concurrent with that, maybe a little bit earlier, right around the turn of the century, you have some new discoveries. All right, so that's where we're. Let's close this out. Now we're going to go to the last lesson. Okay, I'll save it. Okay. You don't want that one. That comes at the end. We're not at the end yet. There we go. Okay. Grandpa, you're doing a great job on science and the Bible. Thank you, Ann. I appreciate that. Notice it says, Grandma adores me. Boy, isn't that the truth. How many grandmas we have in here? Don't you love your grandbabies?
Oh, yeah.
Boy, that's my wife, boy. That's our first, that's our one and only. And it's amazing. We love her to death. So, anyway. Here's Science in the Bible, Dr. Carl W. Deems. The counterattack. Bum, ba, bum, bum. Bum, ba, bum, bum, bum. What time do we have? Science in the Bible. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created heaven and the earth. Here's our other theme verse. Psalms 19:1-3. The heavens declare the glory of God. And 1 Timothy 6:20. Beware, let's see, Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings and oppositions of science, falsely so called, which we've been doing a good job the last couple, 3 days. We're going to, first I'm going to show you kind of where we are today, the Darwinism juggernaut. Talk about the birth of creation science in the 1920s as a result of style. Bernard Rahm in the 1950s, he writes a book, basically a theistic evolution type book, which gets the Christians up in arms. And a guy named Henry Morris and one other doctor, they write a book called The Genesis Flood. Anybody ever heard of Dr. Henry Morris? He's from the Creation Research, or Institute of Creation Research. Well, he was one of the first guys that started the Creation Research Society. So here's the Creation Research Society, started in the 1960s, and there's a lot of splinter groups off of that. And when I say splinter, I don't necessarily mean they were bad splinter groups. They were good. In other words, as more people got involved with this creation research, Dr. Ken Hovline is one that's mentioned, Dr. Henry Morris. There's all kinds of, now there's a Discovery Institute, and that Discovery Institute is pushing intelligent design. Creation Research Society is primarily, from Christians, Bible-believing Christians, right? Dr. Ken Hovline, Bible-believing Christians. Well, creation is a much larger umbrella. This is scientists. Some of them are Jewish. Some of them are Christians. Some of them are Unitarianism. But they are just scientists. They're saying, hey, Darwinism needs to be thrown in the trash can. Okay? You need it. And they use intelligent design. And then I'll show you some videos of Darwin losing his grip. Okay. And just bear with me. You guys had a long break. Bear with me. We'll try to get her done, okay? But I really want you to see these videos. Okay, in Dayton, Tennessee, 1925, Tennessee passed a law in which it was illegal to teach evolution. Here's those guys I talked about before. The ACLUs used the Scopes to attack the law. All right? As a result of that, Scopes trial and the resultant fallout in the next 30 years, by the 1950s, the naturalistic science was an apparent juggernaut that could not. All academic institutions endorse naturalistic science in the classroom. Courts secularized the public institution. We're talking about 1960s, right? Prayer out of the school and all that. In the 1960s saw the rise of the USSR. USSR was atheistic. They seemed to be getting ahead in the science. sciences. So the idea is, copycat. Maybe we should be atheistic in our science. Evolution gained preeminence as a result of this. And opposition seemed a distant memory. I'm talking about 1960s, 70s, 80s. You even saw in the video this morning, here's the Voyager going past Jupiter, and he says evolution, right? Evolution. The reason why we were able to evolve on this planet is because Jupiter sucked in all the asteroids and everything over the last 100 million years. Okay. You want to believe that? See how bad it can get in 2000? Pope John Paul II endorses evolution, but he also kissed the Quran, so I mean...
Yeah.
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 Yep. Careful what you say, we're broadcasting live. Did you call him he's a nut job. Something like that, that's what I heard. Evolutionary science now, the paradigm. That was a big thing in the 90s when I was going through the Air Force. Paradigm shifts, what's the new paradigm, And look outside the paradigms. In all major state schools and most of the private ones as well. In fact, if you want to find the movers and shakers, you find the ones on the peripheries. If a paradigm is it can be modeled as a circle, and you want to find the new upcoming thing, you find the guys that are kind of on the outside of the circle, kind of on the weird on the edge. Guess who's on the weird on the edge right now? Bum, ba bum,
Yeah.
bum, and bum, ba bum, ba bum. You know who's going to be? Us. And if we don't succeed, there's a tribulation happening, and then we'll come back in the millennium. We'll set everything straight.
Yeah. New
So,
rules.
I mean, you can either, what do you say? You can pay me now, or pay me later.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I'm having too much fun. Okay. Only outposts are Christian colleges and universities, Christian schools, obviously churches. And that's the only outpost you have there, teaching creationism and that type of thing. But a new type of scientist emerges in response to the Scopes trial. They start to use science to support the Genesis account. We've had enough. We've had enough being made fun of. And they accepted the challenge of higher critics and other scholars to show that it was possible to reconcile the scientific record and the literal reading of Genesis. We're not going to take it lying down. We're not going to have you being our Lord and Savior.
Amen.
We're not going to take it anymore.
That's right.
All right? Ultimate aim. Discredit accepted scientific notions. Reestablish science in terms that are in line with the literal interpretation of the Bible. We are not interested in theistic evolution. We're not interested in millions of years to create. No, we believe the count.
Right.
Boom, here it is. Here's Adam and Eve breathed in his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Just like God told us. Just like Jesus Christ believed.
Amen.
It's called scientific creationism, other things. In fact, it's become, if you do a Google search on this thing, scientific creationism, and there's millions of hits. Why? Because we're infecting the world. Amen. We're starting to infect the world. Amen. It's a good thing. Okay, the early efforts were driven in defense of flood. This guy Price, he was a Seventh-day Adventist. He wrote the New Geology. He believed in the Genesis flood and as it was written in the Bible. So he became a big name back in the 20s because there was nobody else. But he wrote saying the Genesis flood was indeed, did happen, just like the Bible said. He explained, he said the Genesis flood could account for geological features, the fossil record, coal and limestone deposits. And you just saw that video where you got a fossilized tree amongst all that coal. Amen. Brother Ed was telling me that all that bark that comes off the tree at Mount St. Helens is falling to the bottom and it's turning into coal as we speak. The geological features on the planet, we talked about that. The flood, when you have massive amounts of water, like the Bible says, it's going to do some damage. So this book and his ideas received a great deal of support during the Scopes monkey trial. And then this guy in 1950, I talk about Bertram Graham, he writes a book, and he wanted the Christians to adopt his view of the progressive creationism. It caused a backlash. Notice the word progressive keeps coming up.
Yeah. Amen.
All these progressives, that's Woodrow Wilson, progressive. Yeah, they're going to send you, they're going to put you in chains is what that progressive is.
Yes,
Amen. Stalin was a progressive. You know, if you want to find out what a progressive is. Okay, but then Rom's book caught the attention of John C. Williams and Henry M. Morris. They said, this guy, we're in a world of hurt. 1950s, we're in a world of hurt. We got Christians now abandoning the Bible account. And Morris was doing his own personal study as a student, and he was saying, you know, I'm seeing what science says, and I see what the Bible says with this evolution thing, and they don't match. They're not, you know, anybody can see that. So he got going, and they published the Genesis Flood in 1961. They made hardly any reference to Seventh-day Adventists or anything like that. They kind of separated themselves. They were just talking from the Bible. It was an extensive work that sought to put additional scientific facts to Price's flood and genealogy. So creation science was now gaining a tremendous boost from a sense of desperation among fundamentalist Christians, us guys. And we were finding fewer sympathetic ears, but the naturalistic critics were, you know, they were entrenched. But creation science gave scientific answers to go against a modern day Goliath. And there's tons of stuff now. We have the evidence. But that was a result that started in the 1950s, creation science, creation research. I think that's the next slide. Yeah, Creation Research Society formed in 1963. And within 10 years, they had 450 members. So, spectacular of interest in the biblical flood and recent geology. And that's why I'm doing this seminar right now. That's why I'm doing this conference right now. Because there's an interest about this thing about the Bible, and is it right? And how do I offend the Bible? We got the 1970s, the Creation Research Society was set up, and then the Institute for Creation Research was founded by Dr. Henry Morris. And like I said, you have a lot of hits. Creation science, scientific creation is part of the culture now. And then the Institution for Creation Research begins offering graduate degrees in 1981. You can get a graduate degree. And then, so, you know, there's the Evolution Cruncher. Anybody ever see that book? About this thick with all the information in it? There's a lot of books out there that defend the Bible and bash Darwinism. And because it's an easy target. It's easy. By the 1990s, nearly every conservative church in America had been influenced by this society. Now, this is formed by two guys getting together, probably over coffee, and saying, let's write a book. You don't think you can do something for God?
Yeah.
No.
Two guys, probably over a cup of coffee, says, hey, let's write a book, because this is going down bad. And they had no idea, I'm sure they had no idea what was going to happen. The movement has spread worldwide to most of all the English-speaking countries. Creation science became so predominant, the news media identified creationists and creationism, I should say, with evangelical Christians according to their beliefs in Genesis flood. They know we believe in the Genesis flood. They know we believe in Christian. We are the fundamental, what do they call us? Local? We're the fundamental Christians. Because we believe that book. We're not timid. We're confident of our science. We're able to defend our positions in a logical and scientific manner. I got more science than anyone deserves to have gotten.
Amen.
I don't need any more. New spokesmen are articulate and knowledgeable. Amen. And you'll see them on these videos. That's why I want to get to these videos. Dennis Gordon Lindsay writes, one thing is certain. He's talking about the Bible with respect to science. No verse in the Bible has ever been found to violate any known law of science. God's word contains not one inaccuracy, contradiction, absurdity, or blunder. It's not like the Greek mythology, or the Hindu mythology, or the Indian mythology of how, you know, the great spirit come and all that.
Yeah.
You read the Bible on top.
Right.
You know, Europa and all that business. No. The absence of error in the Bible is truly remarkable, since all other ancient books and even recent ones contain scientific blunders and mistakes. I read them this morning to you. Within the last 100 years, scientists had proved mathematically you couldn't do something, and then within 5 years it was done.
Oops.
So now we're talking about intelligent design. This is the latest attack. This is secular, if you will. Discovery Institute Center for Science and Culture, founded in 1996, blends hard science with the issue of science influence on society. They're concerned that our kids are being taught something that's utterly false. Dr. Jonathan published Icons of Evolution in 2000, shows that the 10 mostly used arguments for Darwinism used in textbooks are either fake or false. He systematically trashes all 10. I don't know if I got the slide to talk about all 10. Okay. The Miller-Urey experiment, that's where they make amino acids or something with electric and all.
Protein.
Proteins or something. No, they didn't make proteins. They make the building blocks for proteins.
Right.
Well,
You're correct.
the experiment is false because they were putting, first of all, they put chemicals in there they thought was at the beginning of the Earth, the beginning of what the Earth would be like. Well, they've now since decided that those chemicals are not correct. The other thing that's found out, this is science, they don't have any oxygen in this. They can't put oxygen in this experiment. You know why they can't put oxygen? Because it oxidizes. You know how you're supposed to take antioxidants? You take antioxidants because it kills, right? They took oxygen out of the atmosphere so that they could perform that experiment. They performed absolutely nothing there. I read in one place where Dr. Wells said they made formaldehyde and cyanide, or something like that. And I was thinking, man, big pickle anything in the group. But anyway, just remember, the atmosphere that they used was not the atmosphere that scientists now believe was actually there in 100 million years ago. And they didn't allow oxygen in there. Darwin's tree of life. They now know from the fossil record that species came up, it's not like a tree, here's the one thing and then it branches out. It's more like a lawn. You know how the blades of grass come up? Mm-hmm. All the species come up at almost the same time. Homologous vertebrate limbs. What they say is because you have a hand and a bat has a hand and this and that shows that there's a connection. Okay, that's like saying a Chevy and a Ford and a Nissan are made at the same plant or something. No, that don't work. Haeckel's embryos. That's a picture they show with these embryos, and this is fake. He drew fake. He faked it. Yeah, and he only took certain embryos to try to show evolution through the embryos. As the embryos grew, you could see the process of evolution. How in the beginning they're all alike and all. Total fabrication. Nobody, even evolutionists don't use this anymore. This one is supposed to be the missing link between bird and dinosaur. Nobody uses that anymore. In fact, one guy came out, there was some speculation that it was actually faked, but they don't use this anymore. This doesn't exist. And the peppered moss, that was staged. Seen the picture of the dark moth on the side of a tree?
Yeah. That's
staged. Those moths, a graduate student was doing this study, and he says, where are these moths on these trees? You know what? They don't let light on trees. It was staged. The peppered moss, if you take the peppered moss and leave them alone, they go back to the mean, and they just look like, they have a mixture just like anybody else. That was that thing was staged. They took a dead moth and put it on a tree and took a picture. Okay. Now I'm simplifying it. You can read his book if you want, but it's a great read. I mean, I read it coming up here, and it's just a great read. Darwin's finches, you already heard about that. Darwin saw, hey man, some of these beaks are really thin, and maybe they'll make a new species. No, it just goes back and forth over the last 100 years. They've had guys on that island for, the last 150 years, 250 years. You know what? Been any new finches. And the beaks are going, big, small, big, Have you noticed how in basketball, the basketball players are getting bigger and bigger and taller and taller and taller? That's a result of evolution, Because in order to get to the basket, they have to keep reaching higher and higher. So successive children keep getting taller. What? Phyllis, I can't believe you don't believe that. There was a time when they believed that. No, that ain't true. That ain't true. But that used to be that's not one of the 10, that's not one of the 10, but it used to be. I could put that at number 11. That's how the giraffe kept reaching higher and higher and trying to get to the four-winged fruit flies. Four-winged fruit flies are a mutation. And they always show the fruit fly, but they never tell you that the 2 extra wings that the fruit fly gets is a hazard to the fruit fly. And it's not good for them. And so Brother Ed was telling me, when an animal is mutated, right, Brother Ed?
Yeah.
On a farm, if the animal's bad, like a chicken, the chickens go and kill it.
Yeah, they won't accept it.
Who wants, if you're 2-winged, think about this. We'll just put it in our own context, sister. You're over there, you're kind of skeptical, aren't you, about the four? They can, they do all these things with fruit flies, poor fruit flies. It's a wonder we don't have, the mega fruit fly that you see on science fiction. Here comes the mega fruit fly. Because we mutated that thing for so many years, But we never get anything more than fruit flies. How many, think about it. How many times have they mutated fruit flies in the lab for the last 100 years to try to get it to mutate? And the worst you can do is wing fruit fly. But let's put it to us. What would be my chances that I, as a young man, that I would be able to get a date if I had 4 arms? Wouldn't my chances be a little less?
Yeah.
Or 2 heads? I mean, it can be done. There's always, I heard that. And I know there's people, at the hip and everything, they marry, you marry to. But you know what I'm saying? It doesn't work. Okay, fossil horses and directed evolution. The evolutionists don't like this because they were using this to call it orthogenesis, which means it would directed evolution, that God was directing the evolution along the way with those horses, blah, blah, blah. Well, hey, that doesn't work. Horses are horses, and you can go from 3 toes to 2 toes. That's kind of hard to do and stuff like that. So he talks about that. Ape to human, the ultimate icon. Who's ever seen the National Geographic picture? You go from a monkey to the next guy, next guy. Well, who's to say you can't reverse that order?
Yeah.
Put the man and go the other way. Nothing. You can't prove that monkey, that monkey ever, the first monkey ever had a child. You can't prove that they ever, you can put them in any order you want. You get my drift? It's a scam.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a scam. It's, these were earlier bones and everything. It's a scam.
Amen.
They date the rocks based on the fossils.
Yep.
And they date the fossils based on the rocks.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm serious. It's circular reasoning.
Yeah.
But anyway, I highly recommend you get that book and give it to your kids. The reason why I wrote the book, he says, those things, even though they have been disregarded and have been proven false, are still being printed in your kids'
Yes,
textbooks.
they are.
They're still being printed in your kids' textbooks. Still in the textbooks. But they're false. They're all false. Or faked. False or faked. There's an ensemble of 6 evidences that point to transcendent intelligent cause. He's saying, hey, you can see intelligence in things that are out there. Naturalism, by definition, denies the existence of any entity beyond the closed system of nature. And Dr. Wells says, no, you can't. That's not really being scientific. And he says, theism better explains the Big Bang, etc. Theism affirms the existence of not only the entity that transcends the physical universe, but is intelligent as well. There's designers of making. And these guys don't necessarily agree like we do with the Bible, but they are definitely, some of them do, some of them don't, but they definitely don't believe in Darwinism. All right, so theist science here to stay. There are over 100 creation science organizations in the world. 220 million hits if you Google it. Christian textbooks that teach the Bible accounts of creation, there's a lot of them out there. My children were taught the Bible and were taught creation science based on textbooks I could buy from Christian publishers. All right, neo-Darwinism, and I'm going to go to the videos next. It's the class of Darwinism is being questioned because natural selection doesn't work, so they come up with a punctuated equilibrium. The fossil records being abandoned is proof of transitional forms because there are none. The abandonment of natural selection is a creative force. They know that for a fact now, so now they throw in mutations. They're hoping mutations will work, but we know that mutations don't work. Geologists now see room for catastrophic geology in their T-H-E-I-R. I caught it first. But anyway, studies, although they refer to it as, they don't want to call it catastrophic stuff, they call it episodicity. You know why they do that? Because it gets too close to home. Because we are the ones who've been catastrophe. So they don't want to admit. All right. Enough of this. This is death by PowerPoint. Let's see what I got here. Let's see what this one is. We don't want to hear that. I've already talked about that. All right, you don't want. Okay. Darwin loses his grip. Okay? Darwin loses his grip. That's where we're at. Darwin loses his grip. Whole lot of stuff here. It says Darwinism has never had much appeal outside the English-speaking world, but it's starting to weaken. Decades as its grip has weakened in the successive areas: geology, paleontology, embryology, comparative anatomy. It is only in mainstream molecular biology and zoology. That's that guy Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is a zoologist. That Darwinism retains, I think it's supposed to be serious consideration or something. But it's starting to weaken. Yeah, okay. Retains serious enthusiastic supporters. As growing numbers of scientists begin to drift away from neo-Darwinist ideas, the revision of Darwinism at the public level is long overdue. Usually in the public domain, science makes a discovery. It takes about 50 years, believe it or not, for the rest of the world to catch up.
Yeah.
Okay? So I'm talking about things that they discover now. It might take 10, 20 years before the common man finds out about it. At the public level is long overdue and is a process that I believe has already started. Okay, now I'm going to show you some neat videos. All right, it is now 8 o'clock. It won't take long to do some of these videos, but I think it's worthwhile watching them, okay? I think you'll enjoy these, okay? This is the dessert. This is the ice cream sundae. This is guys like that believe like us, and these guys are very smart. Some of them use words that I don't even understand, but it's just the idea of what they're saying here. So we'll play some videos here, and I got maybe 3 or 4 videos you'll like. They're short. Okay, but I think.
Years ago, I was actually a Darwinist as an undergraduate in the 60s. In the 70s, I began reading more widely. I was interested in various aspects of the controversy, and I became skeptical of Darwin's mechanism. The idea that variation and selection can produce new species and organism body plans. But I wasn't skeptical of common ancestry until much later. In fact, it wasn't until I became a graduate student at the University of California at Berkeley and began to look at the evidence for common ancestry that I became skeptical of that. My specialty was embryology, so the first thing I noticed was that the embryo drawings in biology textbooks do not represent the embryos. The actual embryos look quite different. And from there I went and looked at other evidence for common ancestry and realized that it's actually not a fact as Darwin's claim it is. In fact, it's a very speculative hypothesis. And my skepticism has been growing since then. It seems that When I learn something new about biology, I'm even more skeptical of Darwin's theory. The more I learn, the worse it gets. Core of Darwin's theory is actually the idea that small changes within existing species, or microevolution, lead over time to macroevolution, or the origin of new species, new body plans, new organs. And Darwin had no evidence for that. In fact, he had no evidence for natural selection. All he could offer in The Origin of Species was what he called a few imaginary illustrations of natural selection. Well, now we have evidence for natural selection, but it only produces small changes within existing species. Well, Darwin didn't write a book called How Existing Species Change Over Time. If he had, it would have been a crashing bore. He wrote a book called The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. And for this, we have no evidence. Nobody has ever observed the origin of a new species by variation and selection. There have been reports in the literature, but they all turn out to be exaggerated or false. So in fact, there is no solid evidence, no direct evidence, that microevolution leads to macroevolution, and therefore no direct evidence that Darwin's theory is true. The biggest thing we know now that Darwin didn't know is genetics. Interestingly enough, Gregor Mendel, who founded the discipline of genetics, wrote during Darwin's lifetime, but his theory of genetics contradicted Darwin's, and so Darwinists ignored Mendel. Finally, in the 1930s, Darwinists embraced Mendel's theory of genetics because by then there was considerable evidence for it. But the mix, the combination is quite as smooth as we are sometimes led to believe. Genetic mutations, for example, were thought after the 1930s to be the source of new variations for Darwin's evolutionary theory. But in fact, mutations are almost always harmful. And the few we know that aren't harmful have very minor effects. So we now know, for example, that we can mutate the fruit fly embryo all we want. And there are only three possible outcomes: a normal fruit fly, a defective fruit fly, or a dead fruit fly. No new species, no new organs, no new body plans.
I told you you'd like it.
Survive
I told you you'd
natural
like it.
selection. So genetics
It's better.
actually is not the help for Darwin that he thought it was. And the more we learn about genetics now from the genome projects, the worse it gets. For example, what we believe was junk DNA is not junk at all. And that's just been coming out the last few years. Much of what we hear from Darwinists promoting their theory about how much medicine needs it and what a boon it has been for modern science, what they're really talking about is genetics, not Darwinism at all. In fact, the major biological disciplines, most of them, were founded before Darwin by people who were, in most cases, quite religious. John Ray, who was a founder of botany, wrote a book called The Wisdom of God Manifested in the Works of Creation. Carolus Linnaeus, who founded the discipline of systematics, whereby we name species and categorize them, was a creationist. Others include Wolff, the embryologist, Cuvier, the paleontologist, Harvey, the physiologist, Vesalius, chemist, all these fields: anatomy, physiology, botany, zoology, embryology, paleontology, comparative biology, genetics, were all founded either by people who preceded Darwin or who opposed his theory. So when we hear, for example, that nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution, actually nothing could be further from the truth.
Because I was very pro-evolution until about 10, 12 years ago. And I'm a firm believer in it, hardly read anything to the contrary, and my wife felt to the contrary. She actually is a literal believer in the Bible, so we would have our discussions. And so I went looking for scientific evidence, something in the middle, trying to see if there were answers to explain both sides. And I came across a book called The Neck of the Giraffe by Francis Hitchens, and he talks about there being no giraffe predecessors and other problems with Darwin's theory. And he said that he went into this, writing this book as if he was some neutral reporter, kind of walking between two battle groups. And he just kind of found himself swerving over to the anti-Darwin stuff because things were missing. Things were missing in the monkey fossils, things were missing in the whale fossils, things were missing in the giraffe fossils, and there were just so many jumps, so many links that were missing. And so I went from that book to Michael Behe's book, his Black Box, and then I went into some of William Dembski's books, and the whole host of other writers, Jonathan Wells, and a lot of people in Discovery Institute, and it got to be more and more interesting. Wait a second here, there's some problems. And so I was open to it, and maybe partly because I'm an MD, my profession, my income, what I do for a livelihood wouldn't be threatened. So I could say, hey, wait a second, maybe I had it wrong, but I'm not a creationist, I'm actually Jewish, and I'm not a Christian. But I get accused of being a Christian fundamentalist and a variety of other obnoxious things, which I don't literally consider obnoxious, but the people who say them think it's obnoxious.
And at Caltech, when I was studying molecular genetics, I was sitting in a lecture learning about the trip operon, how the cell accomplishes control of the process for making one of the amino acids. It's the largest amino acid called tryptophan. And I remember looking at this intricate process that's activated on a molecular level, on a single molecular level, and how elegantly it turns on and off the production of tryptophan, and thinking this is an elegant regulatory mechanism that is being put into play at the molecular level, far beyond anything that I had learned as an engineer. And I remember thinking at the time that this looks like something, not just the product of engineering, but the product of brilliant engineering. And that was the point where it occurred to me that someone needed to do the experiments to test whether that was really the case or not. I remember having these discussions with friends and saying, don't you think this is a little weird? And it's strange how your preconceptions really color the way you process data. And some people just went along with what they were taught, and I never tended to do that. I was always questioning what I was taught, including Darwinism. There are challenges to Darwinism, although I can understand why some people with a very cursory literature might think there are very few. One of the reasons for that is the people who are finding things that don't square with Darwinism.
I got one more video. I think I'm going to skip this video. I want to do this video.
The idea that mutations are considered the engines of evolution has only one problem: there's no evidence to support it. As far as we know, and that's a considerable problem, not an overwhelming problem for scientific theory. There are plenty of scientific theories that lasted a long time with absolutely no evidence. But the idea that mutations are the driving force encounters a fatal difficulties. Almost all mutations are deleterious. Almost all of them do the organism absolutely no good.
I think it means it does it bad.
Evolution a hard time finding any mutations that do the organism any good whatsoever. That's one problem. The second problem is that by now we should be attentive enough to look for contrived circumstances in which we can test this idea that mutations, by definition random, work as the engine of evolution. What we have are a variety of lifelike systems, books, for example, or computer codes. And what we know is that unless we do a lot of careful stage management, arbitrary events in either books or computer codes tend to screw the code of the book up irreparably. Now there's a large question here. If I take a copy of Windows 2000 XP and I start introducing random changes, within a very short while the code will crash. The whole system will be useless. Why exactly is this not happening in living systems? I don't want a lot of hand-waving in response. I want a precise quantitative answer. Living system experience catastrophic failure under random mutations because. And if you know, tell me. I'll take your call day or night. The idea.
I want to get you one more note here. If I can find it. I can find the right one. This is it. All right. This one, and then we'll do one more.
Well, the idea that the scientific enterprise is governed by a majority of opinion, it's not entirely a foolish idea. I mean, we can't get rid of it completely and say that the truth is so unassailable that it can be discovered by one individual, inevitably running against the tide of every other individual. There has to be some consensus in some points of view of science. And to suggest that the fact that so many biologists are willing publicly to endorse Darwinian theories of no account is foolish. To a certain extent, I do agree with that. It is important to present within an educational establishment what is the standard, the mainstream, the canonical view. There's no question about that. But at the same time, for heaven's sake, let's open up the discussion a little bit and present some countervailing views, at least to the extent of appraising Darwinian theory in the context that realistically portrays it for what it is. A kind of amusing 19th century collection of anecdotes that is utterly unlike anything we've seen in the serious sciences. That would be my favorite position. Biology agree that this is the correct theory for the origin and diversification of life, but here are some points you should consider as well. One, the theory doesn't have any substance. Two, it's preposterous. Three, it's not supported by the evidence. And four, the fact that the biologists are uniformly in agreement about this issue could as well be explained by some solid Marxist interpretation of their economic interests. That would satisfy me.
They got to keep their
It's not
jobs.
asking for much. is it?
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
Good luck in it.
Progress might have been
We don't know anything about
once,
the
but
progress
it's
of
gone on
science.
too long.
As far as we can tell, it depends on unique, unrepeatable events, the confluence of genius and inspiration. And in between those unique and unrepeatable events, there's a lot of patient work of accumulation of data, facts, theory, testing, assessment. It's not even clear that science is progressing. It might be moving in a certain ever deeper entrenchment of a single set of ideas. It certainly seems to be true in physics. Has physics progressed beyond Newtonian mechanics? Well, it's certainly been enriched. It certainly has acquired additional concepts, additional powers. Whether the powers are due to technological development or theoretical insight is another issue. I don't think we should make any large claims about the progress of science. We understand science as little as we understand the cosmos. I think, realistically speaking, we're hundreds of years away from having the same kind of understanding of living systems as we possess in parts of physics. And what we understand of physics deals with a very, very small range of experiences in the material world. That shouldn't be forgotten. Also, I turn on the faucet. I don't have a series of equations that can describe turbulent water flow. I just don't have that. Aerodynamics is not properly understood. Turbulence is not properly understood. That's Newtonics. We certainly don't have a rock-solid understanding of the behavior of technological material objects in the contemporary world. We have a lot of anecdotes. No reason to expect progress in biology is going to be any more rapid than developments in physics. Why the assumption of celerity, that things should just happen, bang, 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 we'll understand everything at once? There are very deep conceptual issues in biology, very, very deep, very profound areas, not only of ignorance, but of understanding.
Freedom of the press is limited to those who have one.
This is a country with all too much civility. It really is, especially on important issues. But look how much we've lost in this country. I would encourage you to this. Go back to the 1920s, 1930s. Think of anything that H.L. Mencken has written, for example. Robert Ingersoll, H.L. Mencken, handful of critics, and ask yourself, could one write this way today about important issues? And we've lost something in this country because we've become afraid of controversy, afraid of polemics. That's not a healthy thing. It's invigorating.
Name calling.
The question whether name-calling is evidence of a imaginative paucity is hardly a fair question to put to me. I mean, because I revel in the name-calling, and when I don't have an argument, I tend to abuse my opponents just as easily as they tend to abuse me. Again, I don't think too much should be made of that. There is a pattern, and it's not a scientific pattern, it's a pattern in human affairs. When people haven't been criticized in a long time, they react with a great deal of indignation when they're criticized for the first time. It's human nature. Put yourself in the position of a Daniel Dennett or a Richard Dawkins, who are used to being priests of a powerful orthodoxy, and for the first time in their lives, someone says, hey, you guys are simply not credible. Of course they're going to react with outrage and indignation, hurl imprecations at others, resort to objurgations. That's only normal. If I remark that Daniel Dennett had his last idea in 1936 and it was under prenatal influences, what's wrong with that? It just sharpens the debate. It puts a lot of emotional emphasis on the debate, and it forces people to come up with something better. That's the real point of name calling. It forces people to come up with something better. There are other factors at work. Decline in standards of vituperation. America used to be a country rich in insults. It really did. And we think in literary or intellectual culture, and that's no longer accessible. You get a guy like Daniel Dennett, whose greatest intellectual achievement was growing that stupid beard of his, masquerading as a scientific expert on Darwinian theory, staring at the camera, and no one is dousing him with a bucket of water. It's incredible. Richard Dawkins is accepted as a great intellect, and a fine prose stylist too. The guy writes that his prose resembles a string of sponges strung together on a wash line. Should be said. Should be said. This isn't a question of hatred. It's the question of the effective expression of indignation. There's no reason a democratic society has to be afraid of that. Go after the guys. We've become very defensive, very timid. The fact to justify an attack on Darwinian theory is a very sad commentary on the health of American society. It shouldn't require a justification. It shouldn't. And yet it does. A very timorous aspect to American society right now. It's gone to the black community. And that's a wonderful thing. But no community in America has mastery of the contemporary language of invective, insult, argot as the black community does. Trouble is, not enough of the guys in the black community are devoting their talents to attacking Darwinian theory or quantum mechanics. That's the trouble. Get these rappers off MTV, put them to work. Focus correction.
That's good. That's good.
Never let school interfere with your education.
Somebody's going to get discouraged in high school because he's dealing with a muttonhead as a high school biology teacher. He better not go into it all. It really is a tough field. There's a lot of abuse. It's a very difficult enterprise. And you shouldn't be discouraged easily. The only thing you should take from your experience is the standing refutation of the doctrine of the survival of the fittest that every high school instructor in biology provides. Every education is experienced not only because of your teachers, but in spite of your teachers.
Yeah.
Let's win one for the Gipper.
I remember myself as a high school student, dumb as a post, completely inarticulate, incapable of reading, certainly incapable of writing. And I rather suspect my experience is pretty general. And not many people are enthusiastic about contemporary high school students. That's one point, it's a factual point, whether they are or are not capable. But certainly in a democratic society, the idea that the high school has to be a kind of enlarged locker room where only the coach's pep talk is considered reasonable, that should be repugnant. That's not really how we want an educational establishment to be run, is it? let's give high school students the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that they're a whole lot more intelligent, presentable, better dressed, better groomed, smarter, more sophisticated than they give every appearance of being. What's the loss? What do we risk? Just what do we risk if some of the profound, exciting, deeply perplexing, vexing issues of biology are presented honestly?
Okay. Now, hang with me, I got one more. This is gonna be the cell. This is an animation of the cell that was done by Harvard University. And this will be let's see, I think that's this one here. Okay, and it's only last a few minutes, but when you see this, if it's the one I'm thinking, where do I go? Oh, maybe this is it. Okay, here it is. For by him were all things created. Okay, that's what I want. That's the one I want.
While red blood cells are carried away at high velocity by a strong blood flow, leukocytes roll slowly on endothelial
This is
cells.
Harvard University.
E-selectins on
This is Harvard University. This is what they think. This is what we know now of what goes on in the cell. All kinds of little engines in it and all kinds of things working in there. And you tell me if there's not a designer and a maker. When you see this. And I'll rest my case on this one. It'll go. Come on.
While red blood cells are carried away at high velocity by a strong blood flow, leukocytes roll slowly on endothelial cells. P-selectins on endothelial cells interact with PSGL1, a glycoprotein on leukocyte microvilli. Leukocytes, pushed by the blood flow, adhere and roll on endothelial cells because existing interactions are broken, while new ones are formed. These interactions are possible because the extended extracellular domains of both proteins from the extracellular matrix, which covers the surface of both cell types. The outer leaflet of the lipid bilayer is enriched in sphingolipids and phosphatidylcholine. Sphingolipid-rich rafts raised above the rest of the leaflet recruit specific membrane proteins. Rafts' rigidity is caused by the tight packing of cholesterol molecules against the straight sphingolipids hydrocarbon chains. Outside the rafts, kinks in unsaturated hydrocarbon chains and lower cholesterol concentration result in increased fluidity. At sites of inflammation, secreted chemokines bound to heparin sulfate proteoglycan on endothelial cells are presented to leukocyte 7 transmembrane receptors. The binding stimulates leukocytes and is an intracellular cascade of signaling reactions. The inner leaflet of the bilayer has a very different composition than that of the outer leaflet. While some proteins traverse the membrane, others are either anchored into the inner leaflet by covalently attached fatty acid chains or are recruited through non-covalent interactions with membrane proteins. The membrane-bound protein complexes are critical for the transmission of signals across the plasma membrane. Beneath the lipid bilayer, spectrin tetramers arranged into a hexagonal network are anchored by membrane proteins. This network forms the membrane skeleton that contributes to membrane stability and membrane protein distribution. The cytoskeleton is comprised of networks of filamentous proteins that are responsible for the spatial organization of cytosolic components. Inside microvilli, actin filaments form tight parallel bundles, which are stabilized by cross-linking proteins. While deeper in the cytosol, the actin network adopts a gel-like structure, stabilized by a variety of actin-binding proteins. Filaments, capped at their minus ends by a protein complex, grow away from the plasma membrane by the addition of actin monomers to their plus end. The actin network is a very dynamic structure, with continuous directional polymerization and disassembly. Severing proteins induce kinks in the filament and lead to the formation of short fragments that rapidly depolymerize or give rise to new filaments. The cytoskeleton includes a network of microtubules created by the lateral association of protofilaments, formed by the polymerization of tubulin dimers. While the plus ends of some microtubules extend toward the plasma membrane, proteins stabilize the curved conformation of protofilaments from other microtubules, causing their rapid plus end depolymerization. Microtubules provide tracks along which membrane-bound vesicles travel to and from the plasma membrane. The directional movement of these cargo vesicles is due to a family of motor proteins linking vesicles to microtubules. Membrane-bound organelles like mitochondria are loosely trapped by the cytoskeleton. Mitochondria change shape continuously, and their orientation is partly dictated by their interaction with microtubules. All the microtubules originate from the centrosome, a discrete fibrous structure containing two orthogonal centrioles and located near the cell nucleus. Pores in the nuclear envelope allow the import of particles containing mRNA and proteins into the cytosol. Here, free ribosomes translate the mRNA molecules into proteins. Some of these proteins will reside in the cytosol. Others will associate with specialized cytosolic proteins and be imported into mitochondria or other organelles. The synthesis of cell-secreted and integral membrane proteins is initiated by free ribosomes, which then dock to protein translocators at the surface of the endoplasmic reticulum. Nascent proteins pass through an aqueous pore in the translocator. Cell-secreted proteins accumulate in the lumen of the endoplasmic reticulum, while integral membrane proteins become embedded in the endoplasmic reticulum membrane. Proteins are transported from the endoplasmic reticulum to the Golgi apparatus by vesicles traveling along the microtubules. Protein glycosylation, initiated in the endoplasmic reticulum, is completed inside the lumen of the Golgi apparatus. Fully glycosylated proteins are transported from the Golgi apparatus to the plasma membrane. When a vesicle fuses with the plasma membrane, proteins contained in the vesicle's lumen are secreted, and proteins embedded in the vesicle's membrane diffuse in the cell membrane. At sites of inflammation, chemokines secreted by endothelial cells bind to the extracellular domains of G-protein-coupled membrane receptors. This binding causes a conformational change in the cytosolic portion of the receptor, and the consequent activation of a subunit of the G-protein. The activation of the G-protein subunit triggers a cascade of protein activation, which in turn leads to the activation and clustering of integrins inside lipid rafts. A dramatic conformational change occurs in the extracellular domain of the activated integrins. This now allows for their interaction with ICAM proteins displayed at the endothelial cells. These strong interactions immobilize the rolling leukocyte at the site of inflammation. Additional signaling events cause a profound reorganization of the cytoskeleton, resulting in the spreading of one edge of the leukocyte. The leading edge of the leukocyte inserts itself between endothelial cells, and the leukocyte migrates through the blood vessel wall into the inflamed tissue. Rolling, activation, adhesion, and transendothelial migration are the four steps of a process called leukocyte extravasation.
Okay, we have the lights there, Ed. Dr. Arthur Wilder Smith says, the evolutionary model says that it is not necessary to assume the existence of anything besides matter and energy to produce life. That proposition is unscientific. We know perfectly well that if you leave matter to itself, it does not organize itself. Remember I gave the illustration of putting a whole bunch of parts in the bag and trying to get a watch? In spite of all the efforts in recent years to prove that it does. We talked about the Darwinism juggernaut, but it's getting some cracks in it. About the new geology being written by Price, the birth of creation science in the 1920s. Rom stirs up the hordes, the hornet's nest by writing his book on theistic science. The Genesis flood is written by Dr. Henry Morris. Creation Research Society is started by Dr. Henry Morris and I think 10 others. Now you have intelligent design. These guys are attacking it. Okay, if you don't want to talk about the Bible, if you won't talk about the Bible, just think about intelligent design for a second, huh? You know, be rational about the thing. And then Darwin is losing his grip. Pastor Struble, we're done. Oh, let me say this before, as he's coming up. Thank you very much for your hospitality. I always say that. I enjoy coming up here. It's home, and you guys are great. And it's been really a blessing. It's a shot in the arm for me. We did something, very, very amazing this time. We were able to do the creation, Science in the Bible seminar and Bible conference, be able to get it on tape and video and go around the world. We actually did a video conference, not only between here, but close to Mexico, so a lot of firsts on this time. So it's been a real blessing and appreciate all that you did. Thanks for hanging in there.
Appreciate that. Amen. All right, if you haven't given yet, all right, make sure you give tonight. I won't walk it up and down, but you folks know the plates are here. All right, as soon as we're done with church, you have something to give, you come on up and give it. Walking all around here. Also, there is 2 more handouts on the back table. There's 2 different ones. All right, I noticed that some people took one. There was a bunch of one gone, but the other one was almost none gone. So somebody took a bunch of one, but not the other one. There's 2 more back there, so that means you should have 4 total if you have them all. And I'll have 2 more for you on Wednesday night.
Excuse me, Pastor. But Anna says, oh, brother, you guys are done. Oh, you get it? Oh, get out of here. Good job, Grandpa. That's for you New Jersey guys. I forgot to do that. I'm sorry.
So you should have 4 then handouts total. If you have them all, then there's 2 more, and I'll have them for you Wednesday night. All right. So if you want them, then you'll have 6 altogether. All right. I figured rather than bring them all out in one shot and confuse. There's 4 you should have right now, and then there will be 6 total. All right. So remember that. Remember to give. Amen. Your brother Deems will be heading back out tomorrow morning, flying back down to Florida. Amen. We appreciate him and what he's done. Amen. He's this week, and it's been good. We've gotten a lot out of it. Amen. We've also gotten a lot out. Again, the Lord just moving us, to do something with video and getting stuff out there and doing our website over and just making use of that avenue. Amen. The way that we should. Amen. So appreciate that. Amen. From Brother Deems. And he's a good friend. He's a good man.
Amen.
All right, so you folks pray for him. Amen. Going forward. All right, let's have a word of prayer and we'll close this thing out. Lord, I do thank you once again for this night. Lord, thank you for these last couple hours, Lord, that we've been in the church here this day. Lord, thank you for all that we have learned. Lord, we thank you for men, Lord, science, Lord, that are willing to allow the Bible, Lord, to stand alone, Lord, and look at the Bible and then look in science in light of the Bible, Lord, rather than the other way around, Lord. I just pray that we be encouraged, Lord, as we've seen that last video, Lord, and just what goes on inside of a cell, Lord, inside of our bodies, Lord, and all the stuff that goes on, Lord, and that's just a small part of what's going on, Lord. There is obviously a designer and a maker, Lord, of our body, Lord, and I just pray that we would understand that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, Lord, and I just thank you, God, for this time once again. Thank you for Brother Deems. Be with him, be with his wife, his grandchild, Lord, and his kids there, Lord. Just bless them. Lord, continue to use him, Lord, and get this good teaching out, Lord, that he's done. Lord, I thank you once again for this night, Lord. I pray you bless him and bless us as we go. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen. You are.